The word hybrid likely conjures up images of economy motoring. Think hybrid, you probably think Toyota Prius or Mitsubishi Outlander. What might not spring to mind is performance, but that is changing. Cars like the McLaren P1, the Porsche 918 Spider, the Ferrari LaFerrari, they did a lot to help change how we perceive hybrids. And now there's another car that's here to prove hybrid power isn't just about saving fuel, but also having fun. And it's this, the Polestar 1. If you're wondering why it looks not too dissimilar to a Volvo, there's one very simple explanation. It's owned by the same people. Polestar started out as a Swedish racing team, and by the end of the 2000s, Volvo came knocking for some spicy sauce. Before long, the 450 PS Polestar C30 concept was born, and then the 510 PS S60 Polestar concept. A few years later, in 2015, the company was bought by Volvo, becoming part of Volvo in much the same way AMG is part of Mercedes. Unlike AMG though, Polestar wasn't about making loads of noise. Sure, it would have been easy to get a huge great V8 and slap it in a Volvo and go, look, it's a Polestar. The Swedish boffins had something else in mind. Polestar was made to stand on its own 2 feet, to become a performance brand in its own right. Not just any performance brand though, but an electric performance brand. Its first car was the Polestar 1. Instead of a big V8 or shouty turbocharged V6, the engineers settled on a 2-litre turbocharged and supercharged 4-cylinder petrol engine. Backing that up are 2 85 kilowatt electric motors and a crank integrated starter generator motor. As complicated as that might sound, in simple terms, it means the Polestar 1 has 609 PS and 1,000 Newton meters of torque. Now I don't know about you, but any car with more than 600 PS I think needs to be taken quite seriously. 0 to 62 miles an hour takes 4.2 seconds and the top speed is 155 miles an hour. Slow it is not. The noise is strange, to be honest. It's unlike most other 4-cylinders. I mean, a Ford Focus has a 4-pot motor, but this sounds so much more interesting. It's got a proper thrum to it. It's more like a 3-cylinder or even a 2-cylinder. And you don't hear the turbocharger, but you do hear, with half throttle, 3/4 throttle, you can hear the whine from that supercharger. What I find almost more interesting though, more intriguing than the power or the speed or even the sound, is what happens when you start to slow things down. Unlike so many hybrids, the Polestar 1 has a genuinely useful electric-only range. 2 electric motors mounted on the rear axle are paired to a twin-pack 34 kWh lithium-ion battery, and as a result, the Polestar 1 can be driven with electricity alone for 77 miles. So charge the car up overnight and you can drive to work the next day without using any fuel at all. But also, if you feel like it, you can put your foot to the floor and enjoy more than 600 horsepower. What's handy is that you can tell the car to hold the amount of charge you've got. So if you've got 30 miles of juice left, it'll hold it there at 30 miles. So when you get to a town or a city where you know you're going to need that EV range, or you want to have that EV range for whatever reason, it'll be there for you. You can also tell the car to proactively boost the range. So it will start turning on the petrol engine to give you even more miles in the tank. You can then get to around 80% of what a fully charged battery will get you. That's quite a comforting feeling because it means you get the benefits of an EV powertrain, and as well as 600 horsepower when you want it, it also means you don't have range anxiety. You don't have to worry about where you're going to stop and charge the batteries, because when it starts to get low, the engine is there to give you some more miles. But what if you're not convinced? What if you're sitting there thinking, it's a quick Volvo offshoot with a clever powertrain, who cares? Well, there's a bit more to it than just a clever powertrain. Firstly, you're unlikely to see another Polestar 1 on the road. Only 1,500 were made, which puts it on a similar exclusivity level to the Porsche Carrera GT. Then there's the body. Aside from looking absolutely gorgeous, it's made from carbon fibre reinforced polymer, with carbon in the chassis construction too, making it lighter and stronger than steel or aluminium. There are huge 400mm Accabono discs up front and 390mm discs at the rear. And rather than opting for complicated electronically controlled suspension, Polestar has opted for Öhlins dual flow valve dampers that are 22-way adjustable. And if that doesn't impress enough, open the boot and you're given a window onto which you can gaze at some of the electric componentry. You shouldn't approach this like a full-on sports car though, because it isn't. There might be carbon fibre everywhere, but it still weighs 2,350 kilos, which is Bentley Continental GT kind of weight. But as a GT, the ride, for example, the ride is quite firm, but the damping is so impressive. When you go over a bump, you're not waiting for the wheels to calm down. They don't get sucked into potholes. It just settles down so quickly and flows with the road really nicely. I think the wet today has perhaps highlighted a few things that I didn't discover in the dry, like sometimes there's actually more torque steer from the front axle than I was expecting, and there isn't the feeling of adjustability perhaps from the rear axle that you might hope for in a car with 600 horsepower. But you do have torque vectoring at the rear axle, so actually this car does feel remarkably agile for the kind of car it is, for the size of car it is. It hides its mass really well. I think probably the thing that disappoints me from a driving perspective is maybe the steering, because it's not that chatty, but then I wouldn't really have expected it to be that chatty anyway. It's probably the gearbox, the 8-speed automatic gearbox, and in truth, I just don't notice it's there. I'm very happy that it's not a CVT, because CVTs, quite frankly, they suck the joy and the life out of a lot of driving experiences. So I'm glad it's a proper 8-speed auto, but I never really feel the need to change gears myself or use the paddles. I just don't. It's very happy, and I'm very happy just letting the car do its own thing. Are there any disappointments? Well, as special as the exterior is, the interior is almost a bit too Volvo. Volvos, don't get me wrong, have very nice interiors, and you get all of that Volvo niceness in here. The starter knob that you twist is cool. The drive mode switch is interesting too. You've got a crystal gear lever. The infotainment system is one of the simplest and one of the easiest to use out there. The seats are comfortable. The driving position's good. The panoramic roof is huge. It lets so much light in, and without it, it would actually feel quite claustrophobic in here because the roofline is so low. But does the interior feel £80,000 more spectacular than that of a Volvo S90? No. And that's the other thing. The Polestar 1 is £139,000. Polestar's approach to making a quick GT car is refreshing. Nothing about it feels lazy or orthodox. It's a bit more cerebral. It pulls you in rather than shouting at you. And as a way to get people interested in a new performance electric car brand, to me it's much more interesting than another 1,000 horsepower electric car. It probably isn't the car for everyone, but I quite like that.